It's a pleasure to be with you for the next 40 minutes for this panel entitled The Voice of the Investor Community. We have an exceptional lineup of speakers this afternoon, and I'll take just a few minutes to introduce them. Please note that the full bios are available on the website of the conference. So to my far left, we have William Stevens, Chief Executive Officer of Techtour. Techtour is the European hub for fast-growing entrepreneurs, raising their profile with venture capital investors. Welcome, William. Thank you for joining us. Next, we have Stephan de Morais. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Stephan is Managing General Partner for Indico Capital Partners. Welcome, Stephan. Thank you for joining us.
For having me.
Last but not least, Nir Gartzman, Founder and Managing Partner, TheDock. Founded in 2017, TheDock is a venture capital firm that specializes in the maritime and supply chain sectors. Welcome, Nir. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Nice to be here.
So, just before we go and deep dive into the discussion, allow me to just take a few minutes to set the stage. So, if you're like me and you've been attending these maritime conferences for the last 20 years, when we talk about innovation, we often put the spotlight on entrepreneurs, startups. But today, we're fortunate enough to actually provide you the behind-the-scenes story of every startup success. There's a venture capital firm and a whole support structure that brings this success about. So that's what we're actually going to spend the next 40 minutes discussing today. So each of the panelists will actually bring their own perspective. But one thing that all three of you gentlemen have in common is that your job is trying to actually predict the future, right? So what are the technologies that will shape the future of the maritime industry? Of the millions of entrepreneurs that pitch to you every day, who will be the next superstar? All right, and what are some of the most promising technologies that will shape the future of our industry and make our ports smarter? So those are some of the questions that we would like to address in this panel today. Before we do that, I would like, gentlemen, to put you to the challenge. Every day you get elevator pitched by startups. Today it's your turn to pitch to the audience. So I will give you 6 minutes to actually describe your field of business very briefly. If you could tell the audience what your business model, tell us about your business model. If you could provide examples of startups, the successful startups, and what attracts startups and VCs in the maritime industry. And lastly, if you have time, please tell us a little bit about the priorities and sector of activities that you see as we're heading into 2023. Okay. So, Nir,
okay.
You go first.
6 minutes, it's a long elevator pitch.
Yeah.
Try to do it less. So first of all, pleasure to be here. Nir Gartzman, co-founder and managing partner at TheDock. We are a vertically focused venture capital firm that's focusing over maritime, ports, and logistics startups. But the sector, everything is completely normal. We took the best practices of venture capital world and implemented into a maritime tech fund. So if you look from a business model perspective, we have a limited partnership. We are the general partners. Like startup, we pitch ourselves hundreds of times. We met at least 200 corporates worldwide, and we have 12 limited partners, investors that back us today. So TheDock is startup by itself. Started 5 years ago, today working out of our second fund. Our backers are global shipping companies, port operators like NYK from Japan, PSA from Singapore, and others. And we built a machine to listen to our corporate partners and investors, to hear about their challenges, and to scout for innovative technologies and board founders to solve those challenges. From hundreds of teams and startups that we screen, we invested in 14 to date. If we done right, let's talk again in 5 years from now. But in the meantime, I'm happy to be here, meet innovators, meet colleagues, because in every deal that we've done to date, we co-invest with other funds as well. And to your question about a couple of examples, so we invest in a fully digital SaaS application to deliver a digital bill of lading called WaveBL. Most of the bill of ladings for the last centuries was a paper-based with people going between offices to get the green stamp, red stamp, etc. And in order to build trust between all the stakeholders to accept one digital single point of truth, it's a technology and moreover a business challenge to the people that try to initiate it. We scout and we invest in bold founders from Israel 4 years ago when they were in the ideation stage. Today, Zimline is co-investor, other venture funds from Israel and abroad, and today they are already implemented the EBL, electronic bill of lading, blockchain-based, in 4 out of the 10 leading shipping companies worldwide. So this is one example. Another example is a great entrepreneur that came from the automotive sector. There is so many startups dealing with the future autonomous cars, future autonomous mobility. We told to some of them, listen, you can take your technologies. You have a red ocean of competitors around the land mobility sector. In the maritime sector, you can be unique. And 3-4 years ago, we've been early stage investor into OrcAI, that today, alongside the Sea Machines from Boston and a few others, they are one of the leading companies that deliver the automated bridge lookout, assistance systems for collision avoidance, and the future technologies to be the infrastructure for the future autonomous vessels. So this is just a couple of investments, and we always look for the next ones. Again, happy to be here. Less than 6 minutes?
That was less than 6 minutes. Thank you so much. I have a quick question for you then.
Okay.
Israel is often dubbed as the startup nation. How did Israel, can you tell us a little bit about the uniqueness of its innovation ecosystem and how it rose to gain that reputation?
First of all, we sometimes brag too much about it.
Yeah, okay.
But actually, there is a phenomenon about 300 large tech giants from Google, Facebook, General Motors have R&D offices in Israel. All of them in the past buy out of the market in M&A early stage startups and build an R&D offices around it. And it's like a flywheel that generates itself because Israeli engineering and tech professionals working within these corporates meet the challenges, resign from the corporates with a dream to solve the challenge of the corporate and being sold back to the corporate in $200 million 5 years down the road. Most of them fail, but some of them succeed. And today there is maybe second to the Silicon Valley, the highest per capita venture investment in Israel, in new startups, new startup emerging, etc. And what we try to do in TheDock is to harness this vibrant ecosystem to solve the challenges in the maritime sector. Actually, one of the most significant proactive stuff that we do is we go with our partners to general innovation events unrelated to the maritime sector and pitch the challenges of our environment, our domain, to entrepreneurs that targeting different sectors to date, and to tell them, listen, you can harness your technology excellence to solve also these market challenges as well, and let's meet. And some of the startups we invest in never heard on the maritime sector as a target market before we met them.
Thank you so much, Nir. We've heard from the VC from a maritime perspective. Now let's hear from Stephan, VC from a more local, regional perspective. Stephan, I understand your firm is focused on the Iberian market. And originally, you didn't have ocean as a vertical, but I understand that in 2022, your VC launched an ocean fund. Can you tell us a little bit about your company?
Correct. First of all, thank you so much for having me. Very good to be back in Barcelona, particularly with good old friends like William and new colleagues and new friends. I'll give a little bit of a background. So we are an early stage venture capital firm based out of Lisbon, Portugal. Indico Capital Partners, actually, Indico actually means Indian Ocean, so despite the fact that we had not an ocean fund, we were called by the name of an ocean. Everybody in the team are surfers, swimmers, sailors, and divers, so we were all in love with the ocean. And we wanted to launch eventually, a sustainable related investment trend within Indico. But we did start, because of our background in the last decade, in general tech. And since we started Indico in late 2018, to give you a perspective of our deal flow, we saw 2,600 deals, invested in 30 companies, about 37 million, and those companies have now raised 1.7 billion euros in the last 4 years. And in the current portfolio, we have 3 unicorns, and things have gone pretty well. They're still unicorns until today. Let's see if they don't stop being unicorns, but I think things are going well. But it is true that we decided a year and a half ago to launch a specific fund. We have about 140 million under management, 50 of which are dedicated to the ocean in a specific fund. And we did that because essentially we understood that Europe going through a green transition, part of this green transition is also the blue transition into a decarbonized economy where the ocean plays a really important part. And Portugal and Spain in particular have a very big tradition in the ocean sector. There's lots of industries related, not only in startups and technology, but also in regular small and medium-sized enterprises. So there's lots of investments that can be done into companies, both on new generation companies as existing companies, that can actually have a positive impact for the sustainability of the oceans, and that's why we did it. Having said that, we look more or less for the same characteristics. We look for startups or companies that are solving a problem in a way that is much, much better than existing global competition, tackling a big global issue, because the market needs to be huge for us to be interested in investing. As you saw, we only invest in about 1% of the things that we look at. And number 3, and most importantly, it needs to be the right team with the right level of ambition, the right level of demand, and also being able to work with us. We are quite often, almost always lead investors, at least until Series A, always together with other partners, but we need teams that cooperate with us, and that's why we invest locally. The funny thing is that with the launch of the Indico Blue Fund, we're actually seeing a lot of international companies moving to Portugal to be close to us. So we're currently finalizing 7 investments, including from Turkey, France, Spain, Denmark, Norway, and a few from Portugal. So the fact that we have the capital, that we have the engineering capacity, and also the track record of backing global success stories, a little bit like Israel, what we do is our unicorns are Portuguese-American, like yours are Israeli-American, right? So it's a small market, we need to go abroad quickly.
Very good. Thank you, Stephan. So we've heard the maritime perspective, the local, regional perspective. Now let's hear from William, the 2 investor perspective. TechTour is a platform. So can you tell us a little bit what the company does?
Yes, good afternoon, and wonderful to be here back in Barcelona. We were here for the TechTour a few months ago, end of May. It was a wonderful experience. At another fair of Fira de Barcelona. It's always amazing to see the lively action going on here in Barcelona. People love to come here, including myself, and I'm sure my colleagues here on the panel as well, and it's always a pleasure to see them again. TechTour is indeed a platform. Every year we help 1,000 companies selected by investors to meet with those investors that help to select them. So it's a very active platform in which investors are actively engaged, and in which entrepreneurs have the opportunity to build relationships with those investors. At TechTour, we believe one thing, that there is not a problem in society, in the world, that over time, with commitment, cannot be solved by dynamic, ambitious entrepreneurship, with the help of investors. So this is the good news, and we hear that also on global warming. We hear it on many challenges, that actually many people bet on the solutions that are provided by technology. But behind that technology is a lot of commitment by teams, entrepreneurial teams, startups, scale-ups, and investors to work towards that solution. So TechTour is proud and privileged to animate this platform. And we have been running, our model is that we run specialized programs. So in health, different programs from mental health, clinical trials, or in digital on quantum computing, photonics, sports, so very specialized areas. And we've been seeing for a while, of course, that the big problem of the supply chain, which has been latent there for quite a while, of course, came to the surface with the pandemic. The supply chain all at once became a big problem, not just for us buying goods on the internet, but for a big industry that was relying on components to be delivered. So the supply chain, reduced the economic activity, and at the same time, of course, there is the whole carbon emissions and global warming that needs to be affected, which has been a trend for a while. Obviously, not only maritime shipping, but simply transport on the roads is, of course, causing a lot of carbon emissions. So take these two things combined, and obviously you want a more efficient, more reliable, and less polluting supply chain. This is of everybody's interest. So together with the Port of Barcelona, I see here the president of the port being here, inviting the tech tour here. We called out to our investor friends, and Nir and Stephan and their teams were not only here at the event, but actually actively participated, nominating companies, inviting their own portfolio companies to be there. We had over 120 applications, and they selected the 30 companies with the best potential. So we spent 2 very nice days at the headquarters of the port, then at the Fira de Barcelona, always a good combination. And I can already say that from the 30 companies, several have raised money. Several raised money at the event, surprisingly. And we are looking forward to many more. I mean, the entrepreneurial journey, as Stephan and Nir know, it takes time to develop a company. Typically, it takes between 3 to 6 years to develop a successful company. And of course, the very successful companies go on to the stock market, or they are part of a bigger group to deliver the solution. So how does the tech tour really work? So it is indeed about scouting for the right companies and looking at the slide decks of the companies that are applying. This scouting is very important because, as Stephan said, only 1% actually gets into the negotiation phase. It is, of course, always important that if you are rejected, never accept it as a rejection. It's just a temporary picture about the company. At that moment, too early or not appropriate, many companies pivot. So this type of feedback is actually very useful for many companies. Then it's about preparing your presentation. Beyond the pitch, it's about having the right strategy and proposition. So it's a lot about what is your roadmap? What is the real problem you're trying to solve in the market? If you're not solving a problem, there is a problem with your proposition. How is your go-to-market strategy? What is your business model? What is the funding that you need for this? So having like-minded entrepreneurs on the tech tour, having discussions and Q&A, so everything is very interactive at the tech tour, helps the companies to fine-tune their strategy. And particularly learning from their peer entrepreneurs helps a lot. There's a lot of partnerships between the entrepreneurs. And then, of course, when an investor enters the company, it's like a marriage. You are there for 3 to 6 years, sometimes much longer for the very successful companies. So you want to make sure that you are engaging in a relationship that is really win-win, that you can work together, that you can be on an airplane going to the US or to the Asian market, or spending 2 days on a fair together. So it has to be a relationship that you've developed step by step, in which trust and value adding on both sides is really important. And then finally, it's also about recognition. So companies that are successful, they communicate a lot. They are very open. They're very transparent about what they do, also in an honest way. So they communicate proactively, and that gets picked up by others. The cases that I mentioned of companies raising money, they were also investors looking at the Tech-Tour website. They know the value, they nominated companies, etc., and they know the value of being selected. We know that in Europe, we know that we need to help entrepreneurs getting access to investors. The European market is fragmented. When you invest in a Portuguese company, you will do it by Portuguese law. The same here in Catalonia or in Britain. So you want to make sure that you reach out to the investors that have the commitment to do that, or when they're asking you to move the company, that you feel comfortable with them. So at the end of the day, when you look at the statistics between the US market and the European market, the US market invests on average in the same type of company, the same metrics, 4 or 5 times more. So this is why we need to help entrepreneurs accessing the amount of capital, but also smart capital, so that they can compete on the same basis with entrepreneurs. And that's what we're trying to do. In terms of cases, I'm not going to say more. I think the next session that we're having on this fantastic program will have 3 cases, and I'm sure they're on a pretty good track to raise money.
Yes, indeed. Looking forward to hear from the startups right after this panel. Good news is I'm hearing from all 3 of you that our industry, the maritime industry, is attracting more and more attention from both VCs and startups, whether it's launching the Ocean Fund, Stephan and William holding your first VC summit right here in Barcelona last May. Question to all 3 of you, what do you think is attracting VCs and startups in the maritime industry? What makes it attractive looking into the future?
Money.
Maybe start with Nir. Yeah.
First of all, money. People see the money. Talk seriously now. The customers of the industry is pushing the industry for digitalization, transparency, decarbonize the supply chain. All the new people that entering the workforce in Amazon, IKEA, General Motors, the customers of the industry are digital native by nature. They will never learn how to use fax machine. The port, shipping line, logistic provider that will adopt early on the digital platform will win the future market. And it's always about the future. And everything is become connected, and IoT is installed on every piece of hardware and infrastructure. So there is more and more layers to build on, software for maintenance, for monitoring, for you name it. So there is money available. Companies understand that they can differentiate themselves from their competitors by digital offerings. And while the market is demanding it, so there is more and more startups that succeed. When we started TheDock in the first fund, it was early stage, micro fund, pre-seed investments. Nobody heard about big exits, etc. Talking 5 years ago. Today, we know at least 25 corporate VC, private VCs, incubators, etc., specifically dealing with the maritime sector as investors. So this is a good news, and looking for the next.
Great, Stephan, William, I'd like to hear from you.
Yes, I'd say there's a couple of big reasons why this is happening right now. Number one, the climate emergency, let's put it this way, has led to an increased pressure both from institutions, governments, and regulation for this transition to happen. So there's a push from a regulatory side for the transition to happen. And this is coupled with the emergence of new technologies that are enabling this transition to happen. So the response to climate crisis can only be made with technology, and technology is ready, namely artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and many other technologies that are emerging and that were before only applied to businesses on land, let's put it this way, and now you can start to, because it's more complicated to do things in the ocean, right, for a number of reasons. But those technology platforms are now ready to be deployed, and those ideas into the ocean. And the conjunction of a push from society and from government and the existence of technology is leading to the creation of a new asset class, which are climate tech funds. So in addition to having ocean-related funds like the ones we have, you're seeing the sustainable funds becoming climate tech. And so we suddenly have we can not only co-invest together, but now we have many other funds, many of the funds that we have co-invested with, the good and great from Silicon Valley and all over the world that have co-invested in our companies, now have a climate tech focus as well, and their investors demand that, and our investors demand that as well. We have investors from all over the world, I think over 200 investors, institutionals, individuals, family offices, and so on, and this is something that increasingly we're asked. So I think the time is now for the ocean to have a big push, and particularly the ports, because the ports form the backbone of really this transformation, because you have the shipping industry and everything else is happening around the ports. So I think this is really the cornerstone of the transformation of the ocean economy.
That's good to hear, because the shipping industry, just like many other industries, has set probably the most important challenge in its modern histories to decarbonize with very aggressive agendas. So it's good to know that we have tech companies looking into that. William, maybe just quickly add a few
Yes.
ideas.
With pleasure, and I can only, of course, augment what Stephan and Nir rightly said. Just to give an example about decarbonization, how the maritime industry and the ports are part of the solution, not only part of the problem, is that a lot new energy needs to be sourced away from Russia. So obviously there's been a lot of new shipping having to be done, but also sourcing green energy. I was at another tech tour recently in which South America produces, Chile, Brazil, Colombia, Argentina produces huge quantities, gigawatts of green energy through solar, wind, and even hydropower. They don't have the industry to use this green energy. It needs to be imported to Europe, to the US, to other places which actually are demanding green energy. So there is actually needs to be investment providing these new shipping lines, this new infrastructure both in South America and in Europe, because it requires different type of terminals. So this is actually quite an interesting transition industry. I was speaking in Germany, industry is ready to buy this green energy, but it requires big infrastructure investments by the ports. It requires technology adaptation to make sure that the green energy can be stored in the ports and can be reutilized whenever it is necessary. But fundamentally, I think the opportunity is very much that there is a convergence of technology that's constantly accelerating from quantum to photonics. I mean, people speak about the importance of semiconductors and, for example, Taiwan. People are working on photonics, photon-enabled conductors, which are, of course, not semiconductors. They are much better conductors. We are speaking about an exponential computing power, exponential communication speeds, meaning that holograms that are really real life are going to be possible in the foreseeable future. So imagine what that makes possible.
Great, thank you all three for your insights. Time flies, we have just over 10 minutes left before we have to close. I do have one question before we open questions to the floor. Stephan, I'd like to come back to you. Our audience are not necessarily all experts in finance, and when it comes to finance and VC, things get technical quickly. Could you please walk us through a typical cycle of a startup funding process, from pre-seed to seed to Series A, Series B, all the way to IPO? Explain to the audience how this cycle works and takes the startup to maturity level.
Of course, I think that maybe it's even better to start by saying that not all companies are or should be financed with venture capital money. The vast majority of companies should have lots of customers and make a profit immediately so that they can pay salaries. That's the vast majority of companies in the world. That's what it should be, and those are great businesses as well. There's some companies which, if they have a very specific idea on how to solve a very big problem, much better than anything else out there might be investors like us that say, I will fund you in a way that you don't have to make money every month, so that you can grow to a certain size and scale, so that you can then eventually make money at some stage, a lot of money. So it's at some stage they all have to make money, right? And that's what we call venture capital. And venture capital starts with what is called, the rounds of investment, like a step-by-step ladder where you start going up. You put in, let's say, a pre-seed round, which means the company has an idea, maybe a prototype or a minimum viable product, and investors like us or business angels will invest 100,000, 200,000, 500,000, something like that, for a small percentage of the company, maybe 10 to 20%. And then that money will be used for the next year or year and a half of development. Once the company is reaching out of money, hopefully not just before it reaches out of money, but a few months before, the company, if it has gotten to its objectives, will again go back to the investors, the existing ones and the new ones, say, I now need 2 million euros or 5 million euros or whatever, and that's what we call the seed round or a Series A. And so all those chunks of money are like little pieces that will keep growing, and they're always worth about 10 to 15 or 20% each time you do this, because the company is losing money, so there's no valuation that can be said as standard. You can't do really proper math. And so basically one day, if the company goes very well, it will either be bought by a bigger company, and the shareholders, including the investors and the founders, will get their money back, or the company will be floated on the stock exchange, it will be a public equity, and eventually the shareholders will sell whenever they can and they think it's due. So that's what is called a pre-seed, seed, Series A, B, C. It's just capital increases in bigger amounts at bigger valuations, hopefully, if everything goes well.
Thank you so much, Stephan, for this little educational bit. I think it puts the audience on a level playing field. At this stage of the panel, I would like to open the floor to questions. I know there's a microphone circulating, so please don't be shy. I have a ton of questions still, but we'd like to hear from you. Please. Okay, sure, please.
I'm quite curious. Well, first of all, congrats for the presentations and the panel discussion moderation. It worked right now. Yeah. Okay, so this is Carlos Mayol from Envision Digital. I spent during last 25 years in the maritime port business. I'm quite curious to ask you how you deal. What is the main challenge, taking into account that the maritime and port business is quite conservative, quite traditional, and most of the companies, most of the startups doesn't know exactly the business. How you match, how is your experience, do you help these guys or these new companies to match these needs and the necessities and so on? I'm quite curious because it's two different languages at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. Who is your question aimed at? All three, okay, all three. Maybe Nir, you want to start?
I will take it shortly that this is a challenge for any entrepreneur in any industry. When Mobileye came out of Israel and ended up sell in M&A to Intel in $15 billion a couple of years ago, they weren't any ex-production line manager from the automotive industry. They came with innovative tech and meet investors, partners that help them into this process. I think that this is part of this Via Dolorosa of entrepreneurs that stress only the best ones to fulfill, because at the end, there is hundreds of entrepreneurs that we meet. Like Stephan mentioned, we invest in 1 or 2% out of those entrepreneurs, and we trust on those very, very bold and strong entrepreneurs that despite all the challenges, they will succeed. We don't have any silver bullet or any advice how to do it, because there are so many challenges and bumps along the way. We mainly, my humble opinion, trust the founders that can mitigate all those challenges. And sure, we help to open doors whenever we can, but the most ideal factor is a super bold and strong founders that will literally open every door, and when the door is shut, come into the window, and window is shut, jump off the roof.
Stephan, William, very quickly.
If I could add very quickly, to be quite frank, we would have a hard time investing in entrepreneurs that don't know the industry. If they don't know the industry, they fail the criteria to be invested. So it's not enough to have a good idea. You need to know the environment where you're sitting, number one. Number two, I'd say the biggest challenges are maybe not on the industry knowledge itself, but more on what we just discussed, understanding the game. So I think what we see compared to the regular tech entrepreneurs, Silicon Valley style software as a service, where everybody knows the game. You know the terms, you know the negotiation, you know what is standard, what is not standard, and you know the expectations. What we have found in the last year of we've looked at now 300 opportunities in the maritime sector. The ones that we have moved further have taken much longer to close the deals because the level of education of the entrepreneurs on how to finance their startups and the level of demand is much lower than the typical engineering startup. And so the challenge is not so much the industry, but the type of investment we do is very specific, and a lot of times there's also a lot of science background and not a lot of business background in the people. So that is challenging.
William, very quickly, because I'd like to take one last question.
Fully agree with Nir and Stephan. Nothing to add.
Fantastic, great panel.
Yeah,
Love these guys. We had maybe one last question from the audience.
Thank you so much. I have a general question actually to all of you, because I'm curious and I think it will help all the other startups. I know you have a big portfolio, all of you, for companies you support and what you focus on, but I would like to know if you have one specific targeted offering, solution, or idea that if you hear this, that the solution is provided, you'll be like, yeah, I want it, this is something I want to invest in, this is something I'm looking for. And this will meet and influence the goals of sustainability and the shipping and the maritime business. Like one named solution or one named an idea.
Thanks for a great question. Second challenge, you have 1 minute to answer the question, please. Each of you.
I'm afraid there is no silver bullet. I think if we would do that, we would not be respectful to the enormous creativity and power of the entrepreneurs that's out there. I mean, some governments do this to say we need this, and then you have actually entrepreneurs coming with a different solution that actually solves the problem in a much more powerful way. So I think at the end of the day, entrepreneurs need to convince investors that their plan is the best, and it's in dialogue. It's a dialogue to make this happen.
Maybe a little comment on that. So there is, contrary to what people think, venture capitalists they're not looking to approve things, they're looking to reject. We are trying to reject things. We are looking for problems, essentially. That's why we only select 1%, because we're looking to reject everything, right? We're trying to find problems. So again, if you cannot demonstrate that your solution is much better than everything else out there in the world, that's 95% of conversations fail in 10 minutes because of that. The other 5% or 4% is market size. But the real issue is the people. And I can tell you that, for example, for investments above 1 million euros, our entrepreneurs go through psychological analysis, testing, group dynamics, and many other things, many interviews, because we need to understand who is this person. Are these people really ambitious? Are they going to change the world? Do they have the ability to attract talent? Can they inspire, their customers and their partners? This is much harder to, evaluate in 5 minutes. But ultimately, these are the questions. So there's not one idea that wins everything. It's more of an art than a science.
Near 30 seconds.
I heard that they cut us, so let's respect the next panel of innovators that truly do the work. So
thank you so much. You're an easy crowd. That's all the time we have, folks, unfortunately. After this panel, there's a panel focusing on startups. So we had the investor view, and now we're going to have the startup view. And I think the takeaway I would leave the startups with, words of wisdom: focus on your clients first, and then on the money second. So with that, you should be fine. There's plenty of money to go around, and the maritime industry is also gaining popularity. So with that, thank you so much, gentlemen. This was fun. I hope the crowd enjoyed it as well. Thank you again. See you next year.
Thank you.